This is the Horse-Human Connection, a captivating podcast where we extend into the world of equine assisted learning, horse training, and gentleness in working with these magnificent creatures. Captivating stories from the leading professionals and ordinary people alike unravel novel ideas in being with horses. The Horse-Human Connection is an idea, a place, and a voice. The idea is to support the quiet revolution and recognize the intelligence and true nature of the horse. The place is a destination farm near the Umpqua Forest and River that slows down visitors and patrons enough to experience the shift. The voice is this podcast. Welcome to today's episode.
Hi, I'm Ishi Abel with the Horse-Human Connection Matrix, and today I have Katie Sontag with me, who is a singer and musician, and I just want to know a little bit more about her journey. So she's agreed to do an interview with me today. Welcome, Katie.
Thanks. I'm really excited.
Me too. So tell me a little bit about how you got started with music.
Well, when I was 8, my mom enrolled me in a summer arts camp, and a part of the camp was like a theater program, and we had these auditions. Like I didn't know it was an audition when it was happening, but they had us all sing individually, and I ended up getting picked as like Peter Pan, like the lead role in that little like song we were doing. And so that was my first exposure to like singing. And well, I was in like little choirs and stuff. I mean, it kind of developed from there. So that was my first memory of like being seen as someone on stage who has some level of skill or that people want to see on stage and singing
Yeah,
and
like
amazing.
like a
Yeah.
worthiness of an audience at
Yeah.
8.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
was very like, it was like really, I remember being very surprised. Like my family is not musical at all. It's not something I grew up with. So, I mean, I did grow up with it when I was 8. It started. And then pretty soon after that, when I was like 11, my parents won a piano in a raffle. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so then my babysitter like taught me like Heart and Soul and like little things like that. And I started playing. And then my parents got me piano lessons. So I played classical piano with a teacher until I was 18. And so that gave me like a really good foundation in reading music and like being like music being like a personal practice. And that was so my high school years had a lot of that, and also being in the musicals and taking music theory and dating musicians and singing a lot and being in the choirs and like the special a cappella choirs. And so yeah, like it felt like my childhood, like I I grew up with like mentors that were wanting to help me become a musician. And there were also forces of like discouragement too, which I think is something that so many of us have experienced as children. And I recently have been like really thinking a lot more about what it means to be a musician and that we're all musicians and that this is something that is a birthright for all of us, and like wanting to really encourage all people to be making music and singing together and just wanting to be cultivating that in our community here.
So did you have a lot of goals with, like you said, you had mentors and you were pretty much immersed in music and theater and singing too. I like the
Yeah.
way you phrase that, that you were discouraged or there were discouraging forces. What were those?
Well, I think in my life, it was like, oh, we're so glad that you like to sing. We're so glad you like to play. But like, that's a hobby, that's just for fun. And like I get that now as an adult and a parent. And I think that that's really not what I wanted. I wanted more than that for me,
So
obviously.
you think that they were trying to create a buffer so you wouldn't be disappointed if you didn't
Yeah,
become
probably.
famous?
Yeah. Yeah, there, I grew up in New York.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, I grew up in New York in the suburbs of New York City in Westchester County. And there's a lot of professional musicians and artists in that area. And it's like there's just kind of like a different, or my personal experience is like the way people view the arts is really different than here. And
Do they take it more seriously? Is
yeah,
that what you mean?
that's my opinion. Yeah,
Mhm.
they like and like seriously and maybe like not the most positive way of, I mean, my experience was that if it's not classical and it's not like perfect, then it's not, you're not good enough. That was sort of like the message I received, like ultimately. Like when I was, it's like, so I had a lot of, there were like various mentors and like encouraging adults, you know, and then when I was like 18 and it's like time to leave the kind of like bubble of my community growing up, it felt like that disappeared. And even within that, it's like it was really difficult to maintain a belief in myself in that context because, you know, like for example, there was this thing called NISMA that I remember where you go where we would go in and like play a piano piece for like a
Mhm.
judge. And I don't remember what the judge, who the judge was, like some classical musician probably in some orchestra. I don't know. And they would critique it and like evaluate it and have a conversation with me. And so I did that a few times and I just the nerves, like the nervousness of it. And I remember that being discouraged by the evaluation, like her actually saying like, well, like, is this really what you want to be doing? And like that
Wow,
really
lots of
hurt.
judgment, lots of
Yeah.
judgment.
Yeah. Like,
Not like this is how you get better,
right.
but you might not fit.
Yeah. And I got that a lot. I feel like I got that a lot, like in like eight around 18, 19, like when like the possibility of studying music at a college level could have happened.
Crucial years.
Yeah, crucial, like, yeah, exactly. And now looking back on that, I feel really sad because I made the choice at that point to not, like, I basically didn't, I like forgot that I played music my whole college, like for 4 years. I just like, I didn't really sing, didn't play. I didn't play guitar at
Abs-
that point yet. So,
Abstinence.
yeah, because I just
Wow.
told myself I wasn't good enough and it wasn't the right thing for me to pursue, and I just stopped. Even though I remember applying for college and like letting myself have the fantasy and the thought, like, could I study music? Like, could I? And wanting that, and then shutting it down. And I really blame like the culture that I was of that region in part. And that's part of why I don't live there because then coming to the West Coast after I graduated from college, almost immediately, a friend I met, put a guitar in my hand and taught me three chords, and I started writing songs, and
Wow.
so, yeah, it was like a total 180. And all of that stuff about, I mean, of course, I still struggle with my not enough conditioning for sure, but so much of that went away, and just finding this more heart-centered way of playing and being together in music, and it's just been a journey deeper into that ever since then.
I think anybody that's pursuing their dreams bumps up against that. And how we handle it is, and how people around us, how adults around us, and like you were saying, your community and the people that support you handle that is really crucial. And it can make you or break you or send you on a journey to, come back to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know if we realize like how the some of the very small things we might say to a young adult or even a fellow adult who's our age like could really affect them. You
Right.
know?
Not knowing if it's, I mean, it's good to have other perspective
That's
for
true.
sure.
Yeah.
But if we could teach kids and people to filter best, what
Yeah.
comes in, like that whole filtering process that is part of those exercises that we would do in those workshops we did together, of taking it
Yeah.
in, and is this true? If it's not true, is there something like this that people are seeing that looks like that? Like that's such an important skill that isn't really part of our culture. And so we hurt
Right.
each other all the time because we don't have that inner strength.
Yeah. Yeah, like it becomes more about like who am I from seeing it from everyone else's eyes and like instead of like who am I in here?
Right. I mean, and that's normal. I think until we're 25, we're looking to
Yeah.
the outside world for that reflection to make sense
Yeah,
of where we do fit in and who we are. But at some point, there needs to be a shift, or the solidarity that happens as we grow.
for sure.
So the whole thing about being famous, did you allow yourself to dream? Do you now allow yourself to dream?
It's a good question. I mean, I remember having dreams when I was really young of like I mean, musical theater is a really big part of my um initial musical love affair.
Uh-huh.
And it still is, honestly. I love it. I listen to it all the time. And I would have like fantasies of like being on Broadway when I was like 8 and 9 and really young. And now, yeah, I do I let myself dream about being famous? I don't really. I mean, I have obviously, and like sometimes that comes up, but it's kind of it feels a little too painful to really allow that dream to become like a goal because
Mhm.
I've realized recently, like maybe even in like the last year, that my I feel so much better when I focus on what's right here in front of me and
Mhm.
what's accessible to me now. And I it's yeah, it's sort of like that psychological truth that like when we accept what is, then like we can grow kind of. It kind of
Yeah.
feels like that. And yeah, this summer I did have some opportunities to like travel and lead songs in other cities. And that was sort of like a little like step toward like maybe being a little bit more well known. And it did feel really good. And I would like to be more well known.
And
Um,
and I
and I
think
would like it to be easier. Like I would like to write songs and have it not be like a labor to be heard. That it
Mhm.
I struggle with that. And I'm sort of trying to see it as just like I put one foot in the front of the other. And like I put out my email list at my gigs and I get a couple extra emails every time I play a gig and you know, over time that grows and I go to a singing event in Pennsylvania and I meet people there and I have a good experience and then I come home and I'm with my daughter and like I don't know. Yeah.
well, I
Is that
I
an
just
answer?
I just want to say, like, I hadn't seen you. We reconnected last summer. I came to one of your events, and I hadn't seen you in what, like 8, 10 years, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it had been that long. 2016 or 2017, maybe.
Probably,
And
yeah.
my experience of you was quite different now that you're a mother and that you've been performing and just like really come out of your shell. And there was just so much joy and energy that radiated from you as a performer that
Mhm.
I, didn't see before. But of course, before when I saw you perform, it was, for a small group of people at the end of a gathering. It wasn't like a public event either where there's a lot of projection or room for that projection. But I just so enjoyed being with you and how uplifting the singing was and opening part and the callback. I am not a singer. I truly do not have a good voice. I think I'm tone deaf. And yet I felt
Mhm.
good participating with what you were doing. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that you felt that.
Yeah, I
Um,
did. And I want to say the turtle thing because a
go for it.
long time ago, and at this workshop we were in, there's an opportunity to give other people a reflection. And the reflection I had given you was that it was like you were a turtle where you would stick your head out and be all you could be, and then you would like pull everything back in your legs and your head and just be in your shell, and then you would come out again and in. And then I remember someone else saying it to you too. And when you're talking about the influences that
Mm,
you had that were suppressing you as you were, growing as a kid with your love of this art, I can totally see where that might have come from. And
mm,
I don't see it anymore, and that just feels really expansive and big.
thanks. It feels really awesome to get that reflection. It's kind of funny because when I was in fourth grade, we had a school play, and I told you musical theater really influenced me, and I was a turtle. I was the main turtle, and I sang this turtle song, and like it was this play that someone wrote in the community, and we were all animals. There were these groups of animals. I'm the lead turtle, and there were all these other turtles who would dance around me, and I sang in the middle, and this whole turtle song. Anyway, so it's very pleasing to me, the turtle energy, and I understand looking back, well, that, and I might still have a little bit of it, but honestly, like the experience of becoming a mom
Mhm.
has been the single most transformative experience of my life. Absolutely. And I think coming, I'm still like in that on that path of being birthed from that, because it's not just about me now, obviously. I mean, like it ever was, but just having her as my guiding light of who do I want to be? Who do I want to show her? What example am I to her? Just knowing so much in my heart that I want her to be bold, and I want her to be fully herself and embodied and confident. And so I do that the best I can.
You lead by
You know,
example.
yeah.
It is a lot of responsibility. And
Yeah.
I think not enough women really talk about what happens in like psychologically after
Yeah.
giving birth to a child. I mean, it is so much pain and going through this amazing, painful, incredible experience, and then having your life completely changed on the other side of it. If you're conscious about it, it is huge and it is life changing. And the responsibility that comes with having children that I don't know that everybody fully recognizes. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so unless they have one or have had one, or yeah, I've been like kind of in shock about the way our world treats this and how different it's been from my personal experience. But then when I have conversations like this,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's apparent that like we all get it. It's not depicted really fully in the media. It's not like when I got pregnant and everybody says, congratulations. That's the thing everybody says, like, congratulations. And I was just like, this feels totally inadequate for like what is happening to me. Like, thanks. Because it wasn't just like I had a really rough pregnancy where I was literally puking every day.
Oh.
Yeah, like it got a little better at one point, but it wasn't like the typical, like, yeah, the first trimester is morning sickness and then you're good. It was not like that for me. So it really felt like an initiation, like
Mhm.
literally. So it was really difficult to be like, kind of just like trying to stand like every day and just like trying to like get by and be okay and have people be like, congratulations. Like, thanks. But yeah, anyway, just like all the different stages of like pregnancy, birth, postpartum,
Mhm.
and going through postpartum and simultaneous to postpartum is infancy. So like, that's a really big deal to be complete, like that's all consuming. And so now my daughter's almost 3, and I feel like I've reached a new place where I'm calling it in my head postpartum, because I feel like postpartum in a lot of ways was like a death experience for me, and like, which makes sense, death and life, like, right together.
Your old life definitely died when
Yeah,
you're taking care of an
and like,
infant. There's
and the
no
ability to like take care of myself. I mean, like, this is normal. I mean, I think if we like lived in a world where, you know, there was like, it was, I mean, I hate
more
yeah, more
ritual around
ritual,
and
more
more
like
recognition.
real community where it's like, oh, here's the like lactating women all together. Like I had a lot of issues with breastfeeding that were
Mhm.
really upsetting to me, where my daughter wouldn't latch, wouldn't breastfeed. I felt immense amounts of shame because I was so set on her breastfeeding, and like I was literally like every 3 hours around the clock pumping, like pumping. People probably don't even know what pumping is. Pumping is when you put cups on your boobs and you like are milked like a cow. Not to like, it's sacred. It has its sacredness, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
it was so like weird, you
Yeah.
know? Um And so I just had these fantasies. Oh, I want my lactating women to be like living near me. I want to be able to them to show me. I had like 5 lactation consultants and it like didn't
Wow.
work. Yeah, it was really hard. And there's this, I hope it's okay to go off on this, but
Sure. Yeah,
there's,
absolutely.
okay. Okay, cool. There's what happened for us, and I think this is really common, is that she was born and my milk hadn't come in. And so there's this period of like 3 to 5 days where your child that you just birthed, they need you so much. And she's basically starving because she can't get my milk. And this is just like proves to me that we are not living the right way, because if we were living more family, big family world, then like there would be a woman who has her milk, who's like takes my baby and my baby feeds. Perhaps that's a really radical idea to some people. To me in that moment it was like all I wanted. you know
No,
Anyway.
this goes back. I know you probably haven't listened to very many of my podcasts. You're a very busy woman, but I've been on a thing about primitive activities, primitive
Mm,
cultures, the activities that happened when we lived in tribes or people that still live in tribes. And there's a lot of brain health that is neglected because of these activities we don't do. There's a lot of physical health that doesn't
yeah,
happen, like walking barefoot on the ground, sitting on the ground,
yeah,
cooking over a fire, being in a group, drumming, singing together,
yeah,
dancing together, walking off trail, hunting and gathering, all of these things that, and those are just a few of the things. And what you're talking about is, the shared experience and community and caring for children that would happen in a tribal society.
Yeah.
We need, I feel like if we could bring a lot of those activities back into our culture somehow,
Yeah.
even if there's two or three of them and people could participate in that, like even just being in the forest or at the river or the ocean, we would be so much better off.
Yeah.
And so what you're talking about is absolutely on topic. And,
Yeah.
the name of the podcast about the horses is about slowing down,
Mm.
is one way to enter back into that. And that's one of the things the horses offer, is this doorway into slowing down enough to realize, what we're missing, and pull some of those pieces back into our culture and into our lives.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. As you're talking about that, it makes me think about my love for these singing gatherings that I've been
Mhm.
going to for, I mean, some I've been going to since I came to Oregon. So that's really part of why I've remained here, is this experience that people have cultivated. It's now exists. It doesn't just exist here, but there's a pretty strong community of people who like to just gather in the woods and sing together and sit like and teach each other, like what you said you experienced at in Elkton
Mhm.
with the call and response singing. It's like that kind of singing where it's accessible, it's taught orally, and like usually without written music, even though I am a fan of written music, but I think it's really cool in this setting. To me, it does feel like a return to something that my ancestors were in touch with,
Yeah,
that I'm not
something.
even aware of exactly what songs they were singing or like how they were doing it, but just like singing and making music as like, yeah, a way to connect and be present and in community and connect to that primal.
From a very somatic
Yeah.
experience of like being involved versus being the audience, how that felt in my body and my
Mm,
heart opening, and the connection. It feels like a very spiritual, sacred thing, and so missing, and such a different experience than singing, where there's so much judgment, especially since
yeah.
it's not something that's in my skill set. I'm much more comfortable dancing than I am singing.
Yeah.
That there's acceptance of it and participation
Yeah.
and joining.
That's exactly what I'm trying to create. So I'm really glad you experienced that.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm really glad you're creating it, because it's so important and
mm,
so healing.
yeah.
Way better than being famous. Although I hope you get to be famous too.
Yeah, I think maybe being famous is overrated. I mean, it seems like a lot of people who are famous at a certain level are not doing well psychologically.
Mhm.
So I it's so nourishing for me to be in a situation where people are singing with me. So I do what we're talking about, the community singing, and
Mhm.
also I what I do like 10 times a week is I go to residential care facilities and I lead sing-alongs with
Mhm.
the patients there. And that's also really nourishing in like a totally different way, because we're doing I have a songbook of 120 covers, and I let them choose usually. And we do songs that they know, a lot of them from their childhood, and I just try to make it as inclusive as possible. And like, yeah, hope that they get same that same quality that
I
you're
bet
talking.
there's so many health benefits to what you're doing too.
Yeah.
Like, I wish somebody would do a thesis on that and do some measuring, and some nonprofit would coordinate it and pay for it. And I mean, there's so many studies like that that we could be doing, that once there's clinical evidence that things are working, there's more funding for it,
Yeah.
and that means it spreads. And unfortunately, I mean, it's great when things can just be organic and volunteer based,
Mm,
but in our culture, I would like to see people get paid
yeah.
for doing valuable work that makes a measurable difference that I know right now is making a measurable difference, but nobody's measuring it.
I I truly am not educated about the studies, but I think there have been some studies.
I'm sure
It's
there
just
have
not
been.
it's just not my
Right.
expertise. But
Well,
I, yeah.
years ago, when I was 38, I was in the nursing program and I had to do a research paper and I did it on aging. And I had one peer-reviewed article back then where peer-reviewed articles were still very respected that talked about in a retirement home, they just had people have pictures of themselves as younger people
Mm,
out, and I think they even wore a badge of themselves younger, like around their neck. And they measured the interactions and they played music from the decades that those people were teenagers. And they did do some measuring. And it just the pictures of the music had a huge effect.
wow.
So yeah, I'm sure there's more studies out there too. I don't know what they are, but
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I feel like we don't value aging in the way that I think would help all of us and benefit all of us, and us as aging people,
Mhm.
and also us as needing the wisdom of all the ages, you know? So, yeah, I just do my best when I'm there to, yeah, treat every person like they have something to offer me, I have something to offer them. And it's really joyful in that way. Like, I kind of see myself as like a joy bringer, which sometimes is difficult when I'm not feeling joyful, and like, but somehow it's like if I'm having a bad day, I'm tired, whatever, like I walk in there and it's like I can I
You can
just
bring it.
I can bring it. It's like I feel the joy of the music. Like I feel the joy. Like they like so often they're so grateful to have me there. We
Yes.
connect. It's like it's such an awesome way to connect. Like, yeah, of course I want to like hear their stories and like know them, and we all want to know each other. And it's like I just love connecting in this way. Like I just for me, like singing with people, it's like we bond,
Hmm.
and that's it just fills me up, and I just trying to bring together all the other people that feel that way. Not everyone does. And that's cool. But like I just yeah, the experience of us singing
And
together.
and I think a lot of people don't make time for it. They don't
Mm,
understand how much joy and connection is there
yeah.
because singing just is really not a big part of our culture.
Yeah.
Like it used to be like when I was growing up, I had a best friend who had a great voice and she would sing. And I would love it when she sang, just when we were doing something, we were playing with our little trolls or, as we got older, we might be just, walking or hanging out by a river or a creek, and she would start singing, and it was sweet. It was just really sweet. And
Mm,
I didn't feel the permission to join in just because I didn't have the skill, I didn't have the voice, but I really enjoyed it. And I don't think people just sing. I mean, I don't know anybody else that just sings, just around the house or out and
I do.
about or in the car.
No, it's pretty rare. I do, and probably other people in my like community singing world do, but it is rare, and it feels like every time I do it, I feel like an outlier. Like I feel
Mhm.
like I'm being ostentatious and I'm being
When
a
you say
leader.
outlier, do you mean that in a good way?
I feel pretty good about it
Yeah.
personally because it's an identity I've cultivated for myself. So like
Uh-huh.
when I'm playing at one of the assisted living places or something, like I'll sometimes start singing like let's sing together, or like I just make something up like about coming together, or like So in the songbook, there's page numbers.
Hmm.
So it's one of the issues a lot of the time is folks can't hear the page number or they mishear the page number. So I've been like singing the page number a lot more because I find that that communicates it better. And I just do it. And then sometimes people laugh or like they think it's silly. And it's like I'm comfortable being seen that way at this point. But I'm aware that that's, you know,
No.
but I
It seems appropriate. And there's things like when we're in a leadership role like that. I was
mean,
just thinking about this because I've been back dancing this week. And so I'm thinking about instructors and all the different ways we learn and what instructors or leaders do. And it's a way of accessing the way people learn or hear.
mm,
You singing the page number probably hits a different part of the brain than saying it.
yeah, seems like it.
And so intuitively doing that to help people doesn't seem silly at all to me. It
Yeah,
seems smart.
thanks.
But then I'm autistic. What do I know?
I mean, they're into it. Like, it's just fun. And I mean, singing is really just like we're talking right now. We're making tones with our vocal cords that like
Mhm.
have different pitches in them as we talk. Singing is kind of, it's just an extension of that. It's more breath, it's more intentional in terms of pitches and tones. The more we can just get in touch with, we're kind of already doing it. It's interesting having this conversation with you because we started with like my upbringing and living in New York and the kind of like classical music world. And I'm like now seeing like, wow, I think part of what I'm doing is just like, I'm still undoing that. Like, I'm still just like rebelling against that. Like, it's okay if we're not on pitch together. It's
Mhm.
okay if, you know, it doesn't sound the way that we think it's supposed to sound. That's not
Right.
what this is about
It's
at
not what it's
all.
about. Like
Yeah.
pursuing our passions. I want to say should, and I don't like to use the word should, but if there is a way to pursue passions without having all of these judgments and self-criticism come in, judgments and self-criticism can be helpful to improve what we do,
Yeah.
but if they're not interpreted that way, or if they're not delivered in a way that makes interpreting them that way easy, they really do get in the way. And I just want to kind of resonate as you were talking about this cultural attitude in New York. My dad was from New York.
Mm.
And when I was in college, I wanted to study dance, and my mother was all in favor of, dance and art and all that. And dad was like, what do you want to waste your life with that for? Like, again, the arts or anything creative wasn't seen as legitimate.
Yeah.
And yet, gosh, let's honor how we feel. And if being creative is what brings us joy and what we're meant to do, it's sad that so many people have to overcome these judgments and this like squashing
Yeah.
of our culture.
We live in this like capitalist world that
Mhm.
commodifies everything and puts us against each other because there's all this scarcity around these things, whether that's real or not, perhaps created in our minds. In this capitalist society, so many of us have to squash that creative spark in us in order to get by, in order to, because it was my dad too, mostly, who was the force of that's not legitimate. And only recently has he now, like in the last 5 years, he now respects what I'm doing and honors it. And it means a lot to me that he does that at this point. But I just wonder, I mean, I feel like that is coming from their need. They had to do that, right? Like at some point in their life, they had to come up with that way of structuring their worldview in
Mhm.
order to survive.
Mhm. Right. It comes from survival and protection. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so even though the reality is like you studying dance, who knows like what that would lead to? I believe that we need to follow our passions to the absolute end and not perhaps it's not being in the ballet of some company or whatever, but perhaps it's something else, and what makes life worth living, right? It's like
Mhm.
if spending the day, for me, if spending the day writing a song brings me joy that day, even if the next day nobody hears it, I'm still really glad I did it. And it's what I want to do. So, anyway,
And that's where it starts. That self-commitment to joy and following your passion and your creativity.
yeah. Yeah, it's nice to find other folks who feel that too, because it's just not the dominant paradigm
Right.
that there's value in that, but there is.
I agree.
Yeah.
This seems like a natural ending spot.
Yeah. Does.